Okay, can I have your attention, please? First of all, I apologize for the size of the room, and I'm going to just simply ask that everybody try to speak up as loudly as they can so that everybody can be heard. And I think I'd like to start down here, if everyone would just introduce themselves from around the table.
Good. I'm Representative William Marsh, Carroll County 8.
Representative Bill Nelson, Carroll County 5.
Jeb Bradley, Senate District 3.
Joe Kenny, Executive Counselor, District 1.
Can I speak up? Okay. And why don't we take 2 seconds? Okay. We don't have it, but I didn't know how many people are going to show up. Can we bring all your chairs forward about 5 or 6 feet? Come on now.
I've got your chair for you. That's better. You're outside voices.
Too loud now. Get back to the feet.
We very much want everybody to be able to not only hear, but to participate. That's the reason that we called this meeting. So why don't we start over so that everybody hears everybody.
Very good. I'm Representative Bill Marsh, Carroll County 8.
Representative Bill Nelson, Carroll County 5. Chief Deputy Rich Young, Carroll County Sheriff's Office.
Jeb Bradley, Senate District 3, and Mark McConkey, who's a representative from Freedom and chairs the Public Works Committee in the House, asked me to say that he regrets he can't be here. He had a very important committee meeting in Concord today, so I just want to make that clear.
Joe Kenny, Executive Counselor, District 1 from Wakefield.
Brad Harriman, Public Works Director for the town of Ossipee.
Bill Eldridge, Highway Foreman. Mark Hounsel, Carroll County Commissioner, and I want to also state that Commissioner Dave Babson and Commissioner Amanda Bivard regret that they couldn't be here, but they had previous commitments, and I told them I would report back.
And my name is Ken Robichaud, and I'm the Carroll County Administrator.
Martha Eldridge, Selectman for the town of Ossipee.
Rick Morgan, Selectman Ossipee.
Sam Martin, Selectman Ossipee.
Harold Parker, Office of Governor Sununu.
Ellen White, Town Administrator.
Mike Dugas, Highway Safety Engineer for the DOT.
Peter Stamness, Director of Project Development for DOT.
Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Jim Fogarty of the New Hampshire State Police, Troop E Barracks.
Adam Riley, Fire Chief for Ossipee Corner Fire.
Joe Duchesne, Chief of Police, Town of Ossipee.
Bob King, Sergeant, Town of Ossipee.
I want to make one other introduction, and that is Kristen, who is sitting here, who is Ramsey Taylor's mother. She's really and maybe the most important person in this room. Sorry. The purpose of this meeting is not to relitigate history. We sent out what I think would be described a pretty impassioned letter trying to convey the level of frustration that many of us had with this intersection and the history which continues of serious motor vehicle accidents. When I say it's not to relitigate history, it's because at this point we cannot change anything looking backwards. The state right now has a plan to construct a roundabout in that intersection in 2020. All of us collectively, the police, fire, local officials who have looked at this and worked for this for so long, wholeheartedly agree that it is very likely to eliminate the high-speed T-bone accidents which currently occur in that intersection. That's what makes them so deadly. In order to navigate a roundabout, it will necessitate that everybody from all 4 directions slows down. Will you not have fender benders? I don't think anybody here is going to promise that. But it will eliminate the high-speed, terrible impact accidents that we have all witnessed too often down there. The reason for this meeting is because that construction of that roundabout will not occur until 2020, 2 years from now. If the numbers hold constant, and the numbers are variable, don't believe mine, I don't care, but the fact of the matter is that there will be many more, too many more, high-speed accidents in that intersection in the next 2 years if we don't do something. The reason that we felt it important to get in everybody in one room is because none of us claims to have cornered the market on ideas. We want this to be a roundtable discussion, float whatever idea you have. There is no idea which is stupid, and let's try to come up with a plan to get through this next 2 years so that we do not have any more of these accidents in the interim. That's the desire. It's not to relitigate history. I want it very clear that the poignant letter that we sent, this board sent, was not directed at any one individual. Most of what has gone on in that intersection and our frustration predates most of the folks who are in the Department of Transportation. We're not here to beat up on them in any way, shape, or form. Let's come up with some ideas. I'm going to start up here, Roy, if you don't mind. I want to get going with some of these guys, and there will be absolutely ample opportunity for anybody from the public to comment if they choose to. I think it makes most sense to start over here, if you will. You're the traffic safety advisor for, I don't know your exact title, I'm sorry, but if you've got any thoughts of what we can do to get through this interim.
So I can share what I know and my involvement in the intersection studies that we've done. So in arriving at that 2020 plan for the roundabout, knowing that it was some time away, we did plan for a program of short and medium-term improvements. And most of those have been done, but they haven't been effective enough. And I'll explain what those were. Some of the measures that we talked about and we have implemented over the last couple of years were, first, we did some tree clearing. Looking to your right as you come out of Courthouse Square. Looking to the right, we did some tree clearing along that line of sight. That was done. We added a stop sign in the median island on, again, 171 coming out of Courthouse Square. That sign had been knocked down some time ago and had been left missing for a while. So we now have two stop signs, one on the left side of the driver, one on the right side. We also added what's known as object markers to both stop signs, those red diamond-shaped panels on the stop sign posts themselves, to try to make the stop signs a little bit more visible. So again, minor measures to try to make the drivers understand those and notice those. We did look at the other signs along the highway, along 28, along 171, to make sure the signs were up to date, correct, they weren't blocking lines of sight, and we found that generally they were fine the way they are. One measure that we had talked about that really didn't gain momentum in pursuing was the possibility of putting rumble strips on 171 in Courthouse Square. And so that's one thing that's on the table for further consideration. One common concern with rumble strips is that by their nature they create noise. That's how they work. And they create noise not only for the drivers, but also for the neighbors around the rumble strips. And so we're welcome to talk about that possible option. And then finally, a couple other short and medium-term ideas that we had looked into. We added a flashing beacon on the intersection warning sign on Route 28. So coming from Route 16 towards the intersection, we now have a flashing yellow beacon on the intersection warning sign. And finally, we also conducted a speed study because the idea was, is there some possible way to justify lowering the speed limit on Route 28 between the intersection and Route 16. It's posted 55 on that stretch, and then it drops to 40 at the intersection. However, we found that in considering the appropriate speed limit posting, we base most of our judgment on how drivers are driving that already. We presume that most drivers are driving it to their level of comfort, and most drivers are reasonable drivers. And so we found the speed limits are high enough to justify the limit that we have already out there. What we generally find is that in situations like that, if we simply arbitrarily lower the speed limit, we find that there's little or no change in the actual running speeds of traffic. So the results of the speed study was we felt the speed limit of 55 between 171 and 16 was appropriate. And as for the roundabout project you mentioned, it is still on schedule for 2020 construction. It's being actively designed right now. We're doing all the environmental investigations that go hand in hand with any project. One unavoidable consequence of the roundabout project is that we need to, work needs to extend outside of the state highway right-of-way. And so we're dealing with purchasing small bits of private property. And that process does take time. We will look to expedite that as much as possible, work cooperatively with the property owners to speed that part of the process up. But we, on the other hand, we can't coerce the property owners to sell to us.
Is there any potential for bumping that construction up to 2019? I mean, which is honestly not all that long away.
It truly isn't, right? And we will do what we can to expedite every element of our design process to perhaps get the project started in 2019. I think it's unlikely to have it finished in 2019. But if we can at least start in 2019, we'll just get that out there as soon as possible.
Was there any consideration given to doing things like, one of the things that we've all seen in certain places is when there's a sign with a flashing light that says, you know, dangerous intersection ahead, something to more call attention in advance of either side of the intersection. Thinking even, you know, the big changing message boards, which we see outside, you know, set outside for construction, those types of things. That seems to me to be something that the state has in its inventory and would probably be installed tomorrow, if it were thought to be useful. The rumble strips, and while I understand that they make noise, I'll be very, very blunt. I couldn't care less how much noise they make. And I think I would be amazed if the residents in that immediate area, knowing what has gone on, wouldn't be supportive, knowing that they're only going to be there for a year or two. And I do understand. But the rumble strips, when they installed them on the center line on Route 16, literally stopped most of our fatalities almost overnight. You know, we had a big problem on 16 in Ossipee and Wakefield, and those rumble strips stopped it. I would definitely, from the Board of Selectmen, I believe, unanimously recommend that we move forward with the rumble strips immediately. I think that is one of the simplest, quickest, and maybe would have the most effect. Sir, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Yeah, Peter Stamnis, Director of Project.
You want to add anything to?
We're open to any reasonable solutions here to improve safety at this intersection. And so to that extent, we've discussed, you know, raised rumble strips that, you know, wouldn't be able to be in place through the winter. We've talked about the potential for putting in, actually cutting in transverse rumble strips at the appropriate locations to, again, get people's attention as they're approaching the intersection. That would be on the minor approaches, on the 171 approaches. That could be effective. It's a matter of you know, getting everybody's buy-in and mobilizing someone to get it done.
I have a question for you, sir, and maybe for the audience as well. Is it really only the courthouse square side that really is in need of that?
I don't think so. I think it's both. I think it's in all directions. I think, again, we're going to. I think what I don't want to do is I don't want us to put a Band-Aid on what is a gaping wound. I think we need to look at this from all four directions. The mere fact that we're having an issue, and one of the things that certainly we're talking with our police chief about, and I'm sure the lieutenant will concur, is many of the people going through that intersection are not doing 40 miles an hour. We need to get the attention of people from all four directions that there is a really dangerous situation there. And if that means putting in the transverse rumble strips on Route 28, you know, 100 yards on either side of the intersection, I'm all for it. But, Lieutenant?
I think we've experienced a similar intersection, and I'm sure you will recall, at Route 25 and 153 at Green Mountain Road several years ago. And when we had accidents at that intersection, they were horrendous because of the speeds. And several times I had personally gone there and tried to figure out what is it that motorists are not seeing here. And I didn't come to a conclusion. But what I did find is when the DOT installed some rumble strips and a strobe type blinking red light and a stop sign that you could not possibly miss, that our accidents have declined sharply. I would wholeheartedly support that we do something similar to that intersection in the meantime.
One benefit that we had there in Effingham Falls was that the rumbles are pretty far from the nearest houses, and so it's pretty easy to support that.
Now these particular structures near that intersection, I believe, primarily are businesses.
Yes.
So they you know, I would much rather hear somebody traveling over a rumble strip than sirens.
That's right. That's right. Or running out to see what they saw a week ago. Chief, anything you want to add? I mean, you guys are the ones that are responding to them down there.
No, I mean, we talked about the rumble strips. We talked about the signs. I know we added the diamonds on those stop signs. You might want to just look at those again because those might be causing a blind spot as opposed to aiding. The posts aren't, the intersection's not straight. So where it's a skewed intersection with those signs, you might have a blind spot if the posts aren't straight. But no, I know we talked about putting the temporary rumble strips in, and if they went over without much complaint from the area to cut them in, and we haven't seen those yet, so. I'm not sure we talked about the flashing lights going into the 171 approaches. I know Courthouse Square does have the intersection ahead sign back, but most people miss that one, in all honesty. And we moved one of the stop signs and added the second one back. So I'm not sure what else at this point.
Lieutenant, if I could back up just one. Are you in a position to direct some more speed patrol onto that 28 area around that intersection?
I am, and we have already done that.
I would have been surprised if you hadn't, but if that could continue, we're certainly directing our police department to assist, even though it is not our primary, but to be out there and doing what
I have coordinated with Chief DeShane regarding this, and when they're not there, we're going to try to find, what are these peak travel times, and if we can have a trooper free to be there, we're going to try to be there.
Okay. The state may be able to, with your traffic counts, those are broken down by hour a day, are they not?
They are.
You may be able to supply that data to them and help them direct their patrols at a time that's more effective. Chief, anything?
Yeah, I mean, like Lieutenant Fogarty said, we're definitely going to increase our patrols there as well in conjunction with the state police. I'm in a total agreement with the selectmen about the rumble strips. I think that they're necessary. I think that, noise-wise, it might be a little bit of a nuisance if you live around there, but like you said, it's better than hearing sirens. I think in all four directions is the way they should be. Just like the intersection at 25 and 153, there isn't really anything for issues there now. I've worked part-time in Freedom, and I can't really recall the last major accident there. It's been a while. I think that that's a great idea, and that needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I know that, Sergeant King had something that...
Well, I think one thing that needs to be looked at, and people that travel that intersection a lot, I'm sure Chief Deputy Young does, myself, go on many trips to the courthouse every week, I can tell you that one of the other biggest problems, one of the glaring issues of that intersection is the complexity of it. And that is approaching from the sides of 171. When one comes out of 171, you need to check 8 different directions before you enter onto Route 28. And that is, you have the southbound lane, southbound turning east, southbound turning west. You've got the northbound lane and the same thing, turning east and turning west. And then you've got the traffic that's coming across or turning north or turning south. That makes it very complex for those drivers entering that intersection to check 8 different directions before they even start computing whether or not they have enough time to get out into that intersection. So if we're, I mean, I agree, anything we can do to put the obstructions, the intentional methods to slow traffic down is going to be beneficial, but I think what needs to be taken into consideration is a simplification of that intersection in the meantime. And if that, I mean, I certainly don't have a degree in engineering when it comes to intersections, but if we can simplify it by the means of either eliminating lanes or eliminating different types of flows of traffic into that intersection, that would be, I believe, increasingly beneficial to help preventing these accidents.
Is that a possibility to reline that intersection, to eliminate some of the turns and stuff on it, knowing that it's probably not in your grand scheme for the way an intersection would be long term, but again, to get through this 2-year interim?
Right, yeah, and we'll certainly consider it. That's a good idea, and certainly I think most drivers understand that when you add turn lanes to an intersection, you might make some situations better, makes it more easy to make a right turn, but it makes other decisions more complex. You're exactly right.
Right, we lost a lot of our rear end accidents that was occurring when those turning lanes were added, but we've gained the T-bone accidents, and whether that's changed the sight line from the intersection where the lanes were shifted, instead of the travel lanes being in tight to the center line, they're now out because you have a turn lane in the middle. I'm not sure if that's changed the view of how you're able to look down from the intersection.
Now, Sergeant, question for you. Are you talking mostly about the right turn lanes or the lefts also?
I think it's been the right turns because of the fact that the blinkers are generally still on from 16 and 28. So there are drivers that proceed into that intersection when they see a right blinker turning on 171, they think, well, that car's turning, so I'm going to take off. But in fact, the car isn't turning because the on-ramp to Route 28 is generally not sharp enough to shut one's blinker off on the steering wheel. I know I've been caught that, several times in the police car. So I think that not only is that an issue, I think, but just again, the number of cars turning and traveling that road, going many different directions, is often too complex for somebody that's trying to get into that intersection as it is.
What about the lights like you have at construction, the overhead lights, the temporary ones, the stop lights, go lights? Couldn't those be hung?
Yeah. We can look into that. Yeah. I don't know if we have equipment like that on hand, but no idea is too far out of bounds.
Just need to make people stop.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, or you're just here to observe and report?
Harold Parker with the Governor's Office. My condolences, ma'am. Very sorry. Actually, every idea I've heard, especially the rumble strips and the lights, I think are probably the best for the short term, but that's my own opinion. I'm not a traffic expert. But Councilor Kenny and I were actually talking about this yesterday, and that's what we're looking at as a good idea. So anything the Governor's Office can do to back up New Hampshire DOT and state police, let us know, because we want to make this safer for everybody.
I think if you're going to put in the rumble strips, you also need to do the dangerous intersection sign ahead. And I had a question for you. With the idea of traffic lights down there, was that turned down because of the traffic control, the amounts?
So we considered that when we're looking at different options for the long-term improvement, and what we found was there are certain levels of traffic that are needed to justify traffic signal, and we don't have the sustained high traffic volumes on 171 that would make a signal really a viable option.
But does the accident count enter into that?
It does, but even when you look at the crash numbers, you also consider the traffic volumes, and the volume side of the equation simply isn't there.
So how many does it take to get to that? How many people have to be killed to get to that point?
Well, that's not how we consider it, but as I said, some of the cases for justifying signals are based simply on traffic, and then other ones also consider the crashes that we've had. And so certainly when we consider the crashes, there have been enough crashes to justify it, but still the traffic volumes aren't high enough to make that, in our mind, a viable solution.
I think one death is high enough to do that.
If it weren't, I mean, there are different types of light structures, or two. I mean, couldn't you leave 28 as a constant green until it was triggered to turn red by people off 171?
Yeah, and that's how all of our signals work now, right?
So it would seem that with that, the traffic numbers aren't quite as important as the ability to stop the cars before they enter the more major highway.
Right, and so it's really two considerations there. I agree that if it were signalized, the traffic volumes aren't too high that the signal wouldn't work. I think it would work just fine. It's on the other end, considering the signal is a proper alternative, and based on the standards that we use, the volumes need to be there to justify that.
Listen, I understand that you've got how many intersections in the state of New Hampshire you deal with?
And I think 450 signals.
And I understand that there have to be standards, but the frustration comes at some point. And I'm sure we're not the first ones that you've heard this from.
Absolutely.
The frustration comes that, again, I can tell you that everybody that responds to accidents or lives near that intersection, they hold their breath when it's an accident at 28171. Because in all likelihood, it's not a fender bender. It is a serious T-bone accident, sometimes, unfortunately, non-survivable. The number of near misses which occur in that intersection every day is incredible. But of the grace of God, there aren't a whole lot more mothers sitting here. I believe it was yesterday somebody posted a picture of a whole bunch of dirt all over the road and tire marks, and it was very, very, no reported accident. They missed.
It was my neighbor 2 houses down. He was smart. He happened to not pull right up on the guy in front of him, and so there was some space there because he wasn't in a rush or anything, and he watched the guy cut off the person coming this way, and the guy coming this way drove up over it, and he ended up right in front of my neighbor. And had my neighbor been parked there, he would have been the one that was hit yesterday, and you guys would have been there responding to something. And I live on 171. I travel this road every day. I dropped my son off at school and came through that intersection to go home just a few minutes before the accident the other day. We worry every time. Something has to be done for the people that live there. This affects us. This is my neighbor up the road. We're here. We don't come to the meetings all the time, but we're here because this really is affecting all of us in the community. And we worry about this, especially as mothers. We don't want to be sitting here today doing this with you guys, but we are because we're all concerned about the kids as well as the adults that travel through that intersection.
The issue of the, thank you. So I guess my point is it's not just there are numbers and then there are numbers. Yes, the traffic counts, and I realize you have a standard. We know there's a high number of serious motor vehicle accidents there. You will hear, not just her, but others who will say to you that there are very near misses there all the time. Those numbers have to be counted as well, and they're not easily grabbed onto. I see several people that live very near that intersection. I see others who drive through that intersection every day. We can hear from them, I think, by the hour on how many times they've witnessed accidents or almost been hit themselves. I agree with Sam that at this juncture we know there's a problem, and whether the numbers justify it or not, a four-way stop in that intersection would probably be the best alternative until the roundabout is, if the roundabout is still the way the state's going to go, until that roundabout is constructed, stop it in all four directions. Do rumble strips in advance of the stops. I mean, I think it's, again, all hands on deck to change this.
We're talking about a singular accident here. We have to stop and think
I'll get to you.
about the people who are accidentally hitting the other person that's either maimed or killed. The far-reaching ripples of what happens, it isn't just singular, it affects families everywhere. As you know, it affects your family. I saw your post, thank you for that. What is happening is unconscionable to be sending this man terrible letters about what he did, which was an accident. And people need to have a little more conscience when they do something like that. But this reaches, I mean, it's like a pebble in a pond. It touches the truck driver, it touches his family, it touches his children, his grandchildren, her family, her entire family. This isn't just one person, and this isn't just one accident.
The entire student body at Kingswood.
Kingswood. I mean, it's all these accidents. Think about how many lives have been changed by this. Think about that man shutting his eyes, and what does he see every time he shuts them? Think of what this mother's going through. Statistics are great, but they don't work here.
I will get to all of you, I swear I will. Just, I want to go. Ken, anything you want to add? You're here to observe and report?
Yes, so we have 320 employees up there. We have a jail, we have a nursing home that has visitors every day. We have a registry of deeds office that has visitors every day. We have a courthouse across the street that have visitors every day. People who don't know the area are always up there. So, you know, we have 3 different shifts. And people who drive that road every day, which I do, and 320 people do, it's easy to forget how dangerous that intersection is. But if you're not from here and you're visiting, it is a very dangerous intersection. And if you're not observant enough, something will happen. I've seen so many accidents there. I've only been there 3 years. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, you know, I can appreciate the scientists looking at data and looking at statistics and counting numbers and traffic counts, but the only one we're interested in is the next one. And we know there's going to be a next one. So I've been around long enough to know that if you want to do it, you can do it. You got to stop it, and you got to stop it today. You can't sit around and do statistical analysis and measure up what number matches what number. You need to put stop signs there now, whether it's light or 4-way stop. You got to do something. I drive that frequently. That is a courthouse down there. There's a jail down there. There's people doing business on 171. This is a reality. You don't have to go back to Concord and look it up on a computer and check it out with other counties to see how the numbers match up, because the other numbers would be your money. It's about time to put that aside and go and fix this intersection. You're smart enough to do it. Do what you have to do. The only number that counts is the next one.
Anything? No. Right?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, I fully support anything and everything we can do for that intersection. We kind of look at it 2 ways. We've done a lot of the visual warnings that we can think of short of the lights and stoplights there. We've added the check your turn signal sign, where the town put that one up. You know, the state's come in, they've done the extra stop signs, the diamonds there, restripe the stop bars, stuff, all these kind of visual warnings. And I really support the rumble strips, because that's what I consider kind of a physical alert getter there, where if somebody's approaching intersection 171 and not really paying attention, whether it's on a phone or the texting or the GPS or any type of other device there, when you hit those rumble strips, it'll actually, you know, alert you that something's up, and your head might come up, and then they'll see the stop signs, and it'll give them more visual alertness there too. So I really support that. I think that's one of the key things we can do right off quick that can be put in immediately and really help that intersection. So I just want to put my support behind that.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, just a couple of points. This is Ossipee's Bermuda's Triangle. This is where stuff is happening. So I definitely support immediate action of safety measures to increase you know, safety measures for that intersection. I used an example many years ago in my own hometown when I was on the Board of Selectmen. We had an intersection with 2 stop signs, one going north and south. The problem was it was the traffic that was going east and west, and it was right in the center of town of Sandlinville. We're right from Meadow Street over to Woodstock Road, cut it from over Route 16 past the Poor People's Pub up the hill. We had so many near miss accidents that we put up a 4-way stop sign, stopped all the accidents. Took a while for the public to adjust for the first week or 2, but everybody stops and they safely go across the road to the next, you know, part of the road. So, you know, this is an emergency meeting. So, are we going to take emergency action? I think, you know, we need to really, you know, heavily side on the, you know, point of caution. The Commissioner of Safety has indicated, as the state police here have indicated, that he's going to put more resources in patrolling. He said that, and I'm sure he's going to follow up on that with true things. So we're looking at the interim. We're looking at road right-of-way issues. I gotta believe those neighbors up there, if I were a neighbor of those neighbors and saying, you know, we gotta get, you know, through these right-of-way issues, I hope to God it doesn't take 2, 3, 4 years to do that. I hope it just takes a matter of weeks, or, you know, maybe a couple of months to get through that. I'm sure they'd be more than willing to help out on, you know, the roundabout. I understand that the state has a 2-year process, really, when it comes to anything to do with roads. You know, from the engineering, design, the funding, and the layout, and everything. I get that part of it. But I really think in the short term, we really need to take a, you know, immediate action of some kind, beef it up, go overboard, really put the safety measures, and we know that a 4-way stop sign will put a stop to any and all accidents in that part of 128 and 171. And all your legislators here, your county commissioners, your county staff, we've traveled this road for years. We know the peculiarities of this intersection, you know, and I have to look, you know, 4 times left and right just to think that I'm safely going to go across the road. I can't imagine an inexperienced driver of 17 going across that intersection, not just the unfortunate loss of this young lady, but any 17-year-old, putting the burden on their shoulder to get across that intersection back and forth. That's just a tremendous burden. So if we really want to take care of action on this, we got to either do a 4-way stop sign. You know, there's an old saying, when someone's bleeding, you got to stop the bleeding. So we got to stop the bleeding here at that intersection, 4-way stop sign. And then if we want to proceed back a little bit, okay. But if we're really going to push this thing along, for the safety of the public, we really need to do something immediate. So that's what I would like.
Thank you, Jim. And I'd also point out, in addition to this young girl, the 4 fatalities before that, all 4 were elderly citizens. We have a tremendous amount of elderly which are traveling that road to go up to the nursing home, to go to the veterinarian's office there across 171. And again, because of all of the things that are being pointed out here, you mentioned yourself, you know, having to look 4 times. Well, then you factor into that the slowdown that, quite frankly, is happening to us all with age. So you get, right now, the last 5 fatalities have been 4 elderly people and a young girl.
The last thing I wanted to add was the rumble strips. We pulled out rumble strips over in Plymouth and Alton. We had a series of public hearings. The Commissioner of DOT at that point kind of put a moratorium on rumble strips. One is I'd like to, with the idea that she and the staff are going to readdress the rumble strip policy because there were concerns about there weren't public hearings in those particular locations of the state. So I guess my question would be, where are we at with the rules and policies on rumble strips? And does it mandate a public hearing before you put those rumble strips in there?
So I can answer that. It's actually my section that's reinvestigating our design standards for rumbles. And that's the longitudinal, the ones that are following the yellow or the white stripes. So a little bit different than what we're talking about for transverse.
Okay.
But we're studying that this winter to see if we can come up with a design that, if possible, strikes a better balance between the noise they generate, the nuisance factor to the residents versus the safety benefit to the drivers. I don't know if we'll come up with a different design, but that's our objective.
Okay, so you heard kind of, you know, I think everybody in that neighborhood's going to buy into the rumble strips, you know.
As far as you asked about public hearing.
But the public hearing part of it is because we do want the public to weigh in, just because they might have a better idea on how to implement it.
Exactly. And that would make sense here as well if the selectmen support it. If you think we need to have a separate meeting to talk about that element, we can certainly do that.
Well, one, granted, this was somewhat brought together quite quickly, but I can tell you right now we have about 15 times more people than we have at a normal public hearing. So I would honestly take what we have today for a consensus, and I want to poll everybody before we're done on what some of these ideas are. I would hope that this would serve as a pretty bona fide public hearing. And I believe that time is of the essence. Now, I realize that this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but I don't want it to be 2 months. The reason for this emergency meeting is we believe that there is an emergency. We don't wait and call the fire department after the house is burnt into the basement. Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Rick. First of all, to the family, I think all our thoughts and prayers with the family. We've been here before. I think Mike and Rick and a lot of us on this side of the table, and Commissioner Bartholomew's and Commissioner Cass, were all in my office. I think it was in December of 2016 after the couple from Wakefield. Oh, I'm sorry. So a lot of us were here in my office. By here, I mean with the same issue 2 years ago after the couple perished at the intersection from Wakefield. And out of that meeting came the result of the roundabout that is slated to be done in 2020. So it would just seem to me that as a result of what we're talking about today, DOT has at least tentatively agreed to do everything in your power to accelerate the construction of the roundabout into the 2019. Is that correct? And so I think that's good. I think that's very good, because that, I think everybody agrees, that's the best long-term solution.
No.
Well, pardon me, but I thought that's what your select board chair said.
I want to get we're going to get to all of you in just a moment.
Okay. Then I stand corrected on that, but I was trying to go as I normally would with the elected officials from a municipality and what your consensus is. And I think it's the position of the Board of Selectmen that the roundabout is a good long-term solution. Now, maybe there's a better one that comes out of it.
Let me just correct that real quick. It has always been the position of the Board of Selectmen that a four-way stopped intersection was the most and best solution.
Okay.
Now, we have asked for that several times over the decades and been shot down. They then came out with a plan which was prior to this 2016 meeting, which was universally rejected by all of the local officials, and it would have simply involved them putting a turn lane in to go up toward the nursing home. We all agreed, after we reviewed that it would have only eliminated a small fraction of the accidents. After that is when the state settled on the roundabout. Listen, given the choice between what we have now and nothing, the roundabout by all means is going to eliminate those high-speed accidents. But we have never wavered that we always believe that a four-way stopped light with stoplights was the best solution. So we were told consistently as we begin today that the numbers don't meet the criteria.
So let me just go back then a step and say this. It seems like there's broad agreement today that better signage on 171 in both directions, 28 in both directions, with flashing lights, similar to what happened on Route 25 and 153, is a good, very good interim measure. And I think you have a formal request from the Board of Selectmen for that to happen. Am I correct with that?
Yes.
And that number two, you have a formal request for the installation of rumble strips to warn people of the impending approach to the intersection. One thing that I think should be considered as part of this is to eliminate the passing lane coming north out of Wolfboro just before you get to that intersection. Right. That's an awful close area where you're trying to pass and then reduce to 40 and come to a dangerous intersection. Just off the top of my head, that's probably not a formal request yet to the Board of Selectmen, but it may be pretty soon.
It's a good point.
And I think you also now, again, have a formal request for a four-way stop. And so my thought would be that you do a four-way stop on an interim basis as quickly as physically possible to do that. And then as you are doing the permitting process and everything that needs to happen on a roundabout, you would have several months to analyze the impact on traffic, but also on safety from implementing a four-way stop right away. And I would just reflect the position of the board and probably the public too, that this is probably the best short-term solution to obviate any more of the accidents that we have. And you know, so I certainly, speaking for myself, and I think most of the other elected officials here would like to see DOT implement that in the timeliest fashion possible.
Thank you.
I would just reiterate what's already been said, that signs, and more signs. And when I say signs, I'm talking about lights as well. I think in towns like Holderness, which is, if you ever driven through Holderness, you only have to go through that town one time to remember, ooh, there's a town you have to really be careful. They have these speed limit signs with that white flashing strobe. I believe it's a 30 zone. If you're doing 35, there's this white flashing strobe in your face. It really is a reminder. So on a local level, I would suggest to the town of Ossipee that you consider those solar speed limit signs just as a temporary basis, and you can use them all around the town once you've purchased them. Those red triangle, not triangle, I'm sorry, red diamond signs. I was wondering if the state could add a red LED light temporarily on both the courts, the 171 sides where the stops. And then on the 28 side, between that state DOT sign, like, I was going to say Chief Moon, but you are Chief, always Chief. Selectman Morgan stated, and also the warning speed limit signs, and I'm always a strong believer in police presence being a strong deterrent.
And Chief, I am sure that we can count on the Sheriff's Department to assist in that regard as well with the other two agencies. I knew that without saying, but I'm just going to add it. Can I just get through these last two first?
Thank you. I'm just fed up with all the excuses over the last couple of years. Studies, the state has to go back, how many cars. It just seems ridiculous that something can't be done. It can't be done immediately. I'll pay for a light bulb. Just go to that light, put a new red bulb going all four directions. Seems like you should be able to do that tomorrow. It just seems ridiculous. Studies, this and that, as people unfortunately die, and we get the excuse, well, there isn't enough traffic. Well, I disagree with that. With all the money spent by the state on roads, they can't come up with something and have it done within a month. And the expertise they have.
Thank you, Rick. I'm kind of new to this compared to some of the other people around the table. It surprises me how long it takes to get government to accomplish anything. And my conclusion from the meeting that we had last December at Jeb's office in Concord was that we all concluded that the problem with this intersection is the speed that people are going on Route 28. Now, there are lots of ways to slow people down. Put down stop signs, yes, they can run stop signs. Put up a red light, yes, they can run the red lights. The transverse rumble strips will slow them down, because if they don't do that, they will hurt their cars. And I have to admit, I was persuaded that the roundabout would work in slowing people down on Route 28. That was our objective. It does require getting more land. My recollection is that one of the four corners is already owned by the state, and I believe the second of the four corners is owned by the hospital, and I'm on the hospital board, so I'd be glad to help work to facilitate that part. I think that there may be ways that we can facilitate getting something done in the short term, but we need to slow down the cars on Route 28. That's the whole thing that needs to happen.
I'm sorry, I got here too late to get to my proper seat.
Well, come on up.
Well, no, I'll do it from here. But I'm one of the commissioners. I drove that road for 16 years going to Kingswood, and I never could understand why they made that section that goes from the old courthouse down to 28. Why not the old way and come down by the post office? And my thought today, and it's an emergency meeting, an emergency result should result in something today. And if you block that road off, and local people can come out and go down by the post office, that corner down there, as jumbled as it is, doesn't seem to cause accidents. And that way people could go up 171, but when you come out of 171 from the courthouse, you've got either right or left. There's no thought of going across the street. And we could do that today. And there wouldn't be anybody killed after today.
It's a conjunction. We all are aware of this intersection as we sit here, but if you're coming from the nursing home and you have a loved one that's not doing well or possibly dying, your mind is not on the signs. You're really not thinking. And if you're coming from the courthouse and you've had a bad day, you're not thinking about the signs. Any number of things, whether you're distracted by texting, a rumble strip is going to make you pick your head up instantly and say, what did I hit? And you're going to look and you're going to stop in time. So four-way stop is great, but you've got to get their attention before you get there.
Rachel, I'm going to call on you because I know you had your hand up quite a bit, so come on.
Rachel Ward. In the cities, they have other traffic lights at where it's red, green, and yellow, and at the side streets, they have a kind that makes it turn if you're coming up to it. So couldn't we have that kind?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've discussed. So you'd have what you would have would be your regular traffic lights on Route 28, but they would only turn to red when people were trying to come off from 171.
And that will take care of the few people who travel at night or such.
It doesn't matter if it has any stuff.
I'd like to know when the census, the traffic census was done. What month and what season and how long? Because our traffic does ebb and flow. I've never seen a counter on a weekend. On the, the little counter strips on the road.
Night.
And from Friday night to Sunday night, we are inundated with traffic going north and south. And they've never counted it at that time that I know of. So I was curious how your count was made.
I don't recall when we had our last set of traffic counts. What we generally do, though, whenever we count them during the year, we then adjust the numbers to reflect an average condition that represents the entire year. So you're right, it doesn't necessarily reflect the highest periods. You're right.
Nothing average about this situation.
Sir?
As the officer pointed out, a lot of traffic towards Wolfboro on 28 still has a right turn indicator running. Even with the traffic circle, you're going to have an accident. People coming southbound on 171, as they're entering, they see a right turn indicator going, they're going to pull out, and that car was going to go straight anyhow. You're still going to have to fix that turnoff from 16. That's a nice gentle turnoff.
You're absolutely right. That's why we added, the town actually added that sign out there on 28 and got an agreement from the state not to take it down.
Right.
One of the things that is supposed to be done when the Route 16 and 28 intersection is rebuilt, that's one of the things that is in the plans, is to change the radius of that corner so that it will deactivate blinkers. We are aware of it, but again, that is a part of what goes on down there. Again, back up real quickly. The only reason that this board supported the roundabout is because it is a solid plan which would in fact reduce the speed of everybody coming in. We have always believed that the four-way stoplight was the best answer for that intersection. If we can't get that, the roundabout was the next best thing. And again, it won't stop all accidents, you're absolutely right, but it will reduce and eliminate those high-speed T-bone accidents, which is the ones that we're here all about. Ma'am.
The sign that was put up that says to turn your blinker off is a nice rectangular black and white sign. I think one thing that could immediately fix things a bit is to have that picture framed in like bright orange or put a blinker light there at that sign, something to draw people's attention that it says turn your signal off.
My name's Ruth and I'm a senior at Kingswood High School.
And I don't see why we have to wait till 2020 to slow down the intersection. Because a lot of the accidents, and not all of them, but a lot of them are caused by speed. I was in an accident there 6 years ago caused by speed, and I could have lost my life. And I don't see why we have to wait another year and a half, 2 years to slow down 28. Like, sure, the roundabout's a good idea, and I agree that like a four-way stop is what's best. But if we're going with the roundabout, I don't see why we can't temporarily do something to change the speed. Because a lot of people don't slow down. Because it goes 55, a tiny section is 40, and it goes right back up to 55, and a lot of people don't even bother to slow down. So I think something needs to happen there.
Thank you. Roy?
Thank you. I'm Roy Barron. I live in Ossipee. You just met my daughter. She's about to turn 18, be a older pretty quick. I use that intersection all the time. I mean, a lot. I drive a truck and trailer, my pickup. I've lost count how many times I've almost been T-boned there. I stopped going that way with the truck and trailer because I'm afraid I'm going to get hit. They see the truck, and they pick up speed. You can actually watch the front of the car come off the ground when they pick up speed to beat me. The only solution to that whole place is a four-way stop and lights. The roundabouts are never going to work because of all the driveways, the slopes of the hills, and the whole 9 yards. I do construction. I use the roundabouts up there in Meredith. They're a pain in the you-know-what. I don't know anybody drives them, but you guys don't live here. We do. How many more people, our friends, our family, our guests from out of state, out of town, are going to die at an intersection before we do something? The state's been negligent for a lot of years. It's time to get the finger out of their butt and stop doing all this damn surveys and stuff that don't amount to, you know what, the snow and our lives are more important. You've taken oath to protect our lives. You're not doing it. Thank you. Oh, one other thing I've noticed works very well. Those speed limit trap signs they use a lot of places that go from blue to red to yellow. I've noticed a lot of places that makes cars hit the brakes real quick.
Dennis and Gender. I guess my question is to all three departments, state police, town, and county. This is a troubling intersection, is it not? I don't travel that road as much as others do, but as many times as I travel that road, I honestly have never seen a cop there. So I think to help right now, these problems, that the solutions you've come up to are going to be a big help. But I think we need to have our three departments work together in the busy time of day, maybe in the morning when traffic's going to Kingswood and all the kids are on the road. Maybe in the evening when all the people are going home. It doesn't have to be all day long. But we need to get some presence out there that people see, hey, the cops mean business, we're going to slow down here. You see a blue light and you automatically slow down. We use the blue light at the school. He's never even in the car. He's usually outside, he's in the school. But that light slows you down. We don't, I'm having a hard time understanding why 2 years ago you decided to do something about this. And now here we are looking 2 more years ahead before something's done. Isn't there any flexibility in this state? I mean, DOT sitting here, there's got to be projects that you're on right now that are minor, don't really need to be done at this point, but there's something on the books. Why can't you take that money and put it into this project right now? Why delay? People are dying there. There's a mother sitting here, broken-hearted. This could have been taken care of 2 years ago. Here we are sitting here today saying we're going to look ahead 2 years. We have people here who are elected. We have people here who are hired to take care of the public. If you can't do your jobs, and this to me is a serious one, if you can't take care of this problem in a faster manner than you have, maybe we need some new people in your position.
The other thing I would point out, Jenny, you're absolutely right. Well, first of all, I would even go farther than that. It shouldn't have been corrected 2 years ago. It should have been corrected more than 20 years ago. But that being said, we have collectively worked with the state police, RPD, and the sheriff's department. We're asking them to do more. That is a piece of the puzzle. But to be fair, there are more police officers that travel that road than any other town in the county because of the jail and the courthouse. There are deputies, the sheriff's department is up there. There are deputies in and out of that building all hours of the day and night. Our guys are down at court every day, every day. So, yes, we're gonna do more. We want to do more. That is a small piece of the puzzle. Ma'am.
Hi, I live on the corner of 171 and County Farm Road, so I travel this a lot. Number one, with all due respect, I don't think four-way stop signs will do any good at that intersection. Route 28 travelers just are not going to be paying attention to that. There's a blinking light there now. It sounds like this roundabout, which I agree with this gentleman, roundabouts just don't do it for me. And it sounds like the DOT is shoving this roundabout down our throats. It's not what we want. It's going to take longer, and how many more people die? It can't take that long to put a trip light in there so that 28 travelers can keep going until one of us comes out to 171. It can't be that difficult. And if there's not enough traffic, you let me know when you put those out, and I'll just go round and round the block so you get more traffic.
I think we all might.
Because the numbers should not count. The numbers like Kristen's daughter should count, like the elderly couple, like all the other people. It can't be that hard to put a regular light in there.
Right.
And I don't know what it costs, but I keep seeing figures of $1 million for this roundabout. And I don't know who's putting all these roundabouts around the state, but I don't like them. I don't know if somebody's, you know, who's promoting these roundabouts, but they don't do, like I said, they don't do anything for me, and it would be so much quicker to put this stoplight in there and stop these accidents.
A lot safer.
Yeah, Rick, as well as you know, I was a selectman on the board, and I went down to Concord, and I actually sat beside Mr. Bradley on this whole thing, which was my outcome of it when I left, that nothing was going to be done by the talks of these gentlemen over here. I believe strongly that, and as well as most of you people, that we need something done now, not tomorrow, now. And it's them boys right there that can do it, along with the governor's office and these gentlemen that are in high office. They can put it on to them to get it done. Lights, stop signs, four-way, great. But they need to get it done. They need to get it done now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Not just a bunch of, well, we're going to look into it. Yeah, I heard that look into it when I was down in Concord. And thanks to Mr. Bradley and a few others, they set me between the chief and him because they knew I was going to get rowdy. Something has to be done. Too many people are dying there. And it's going to happen again. And I'm going to point my finger right at them guys right over there because they're the DOT, and they're supposed to have all the power in the world, the DOT. Let's get it done, gentlemen. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Just a question. What happens to all the old police cars and the old sheriff's cars when you get the new ones? Why can't you leave one at the intersection, just as a dummy vehicle?
You can. Listen, I want all ideas. You can. But honest to God, it takes people just about 2 days to figure out that nobody's in it, and then they're going back to what they're doing. I understand.
You can put in there.
I understand.
Yeah, for an example, go up to North Conway, the North-South Road, the Walmart, come out to that roundabout. All it is another form of a racetrack. And who gets up there first? Go a little further north, there's another one. It's ridiculous. And I'm a truck driver, and I'll tell you, a lot of the trailers that I haul, you wouldn't be able to make it through these without blowing a tire. And in the wintertime, how do they clean those roundabouts? Not with a plow, they have to come in with a bucket loader. So it's a completely stupid thing to put in there.
Sir?
First of all, I'd like to thank the selectmen for holding this meeting, which I think was long overdue. I would also like to say that I support fully the idea of a four-way stop. I myself was T-boned there a number of years ago, and I still approach all of these kinds of intersections around the state with trepidation, because you never know where the cars are coming from. And at 171 and 28, the problem for me was that a car from Massachusetts was coming at full speed on 171 from Courthouse Square and smashed right into me. Totaled our two cars, sent us both to the hospital. So I think something needs to be done. And I'd like to know why the DOT can't install four-way traffic lights right away to replace the existing traffic light. They've got electricity. They seem to have sufficient space for left turn lane, right turn lane, in all four directions. This could be done tomorrow, and I think the idea of saying, oh, we'll wait 2 more years until the roundabout comes, I think we've already heard the problems of roundabouts. I share those views. I've encountered these things around the state. They're too tight, for one thing. I think roundabouts that are bigger, that are in more rural areas, might work. I've encountered them in different places, but these tight ones that the DOT has constructed just don't work. And the traffic moves in a very awkward way around them. So why can't the DOT waive its rules, whatever rules it has about traffic count, and simply say, we're going to replace these flashing lights with a four-way stoplight? They could do that tomorrow.
I have a comment that the speed is a factor, but also your line of sight. If you're sitting in a truck, you have a higher perspective. You can see out around, but I also ride with friends that have lower passenger vehicles, and your line of sight is clipped dramatically. I'm surprised really at the difference. And then that, I don't know what you call it, but the metal piece. Signage. Between your windshield and your,
Yes.
and your car door. That can be a blind spot as well. So you can be going slowly, but if your line of sight doesn't correspond, there's still going to be problems.
I'd just like to add something. Obviously, you all know I want to get rid of this roundabout idea altogether. But to put warning lights ahead of the four-way traffic light, like you have going down 16 to Union, you drop down to 35 miles an hour, and you have a big light across that says that there's a traffic light ahead. I think that would help, as well as lowering speeds on 28 a little bit.
We have 2 comments. One, the traffic lights cost $1 million. What are our kids' lights worth? Aren't they worth $1 million?
Oh, yes. 2,
what about our police officers, our ambulance drivers, and our EMTs, and our firemen? They have to go to these accidents and take these people out. How about their nightmares? That's more your ripple effects nobody's thinking about. This affects everybody, not just a couple people, but everybody in the community. About time you put the value on the people's lives and not your count and what it costs to put the lights in. Rick?
I'm at the office on the corner, one of the third of the 4 corners. The trip traffic light is the way to go. No roundabout. If we end up doing the roundabout, fine, but let's get that traffic light in there right away. Rumble strips, fine. I haven't gotten any letter from the state yet about eminent domain, but I would respond to it very quickly and say, sure. But the question that I would like to have answered is, if a decision is made, hopefully today, to put in the trip traffic light, how long does it take to get it installed?
Part of the problem with acting immediately that I see from a traffic signal standpoint is that it does introduce other risks. It resolves a number of things that you all spoken about, but it does introduce other risks and other issues with the intersection. You have similar issues with people stopping for the traffic signals. You have, if part of what we do, and that takes so long, is we engineer the intersection so that it's according to requirements. And if it's not done to requirements, then there are other issues that can arise with regards to liability and other accidents. And so we see this a lot in areas where we've installed traffic signals and there's been a fatal accident, and the pushback has been well, you didn't install them right, you didn't meet the standards, there's something wrong here, and there's litigation that comes out of it. I'm not saying that that's the end-all, be-all, but there are other considerations, and to just install, bring out the equipment, install traffic signals, it's not gonna be an immediate solution. It really isn't. It takes some time to make sure that it's done properly and safely, and it provides a solution that everybody wants here. We don't want to create any more dangers. We don't want to do that.
And I appreciate and understand that process. We were also involved pretty heavily when the decision was made to put in lights at 16 and 28, 16 and 25 as well. And that was a similar situation. Ultimately, it was litigation, it was liability which caused that to happen. Because the Commissioner of Transportation at the time made the mistake of putting it in writing to me that there was agreement that there was a need for lights, but that there wasn't the funding and et cetera, as you've just pointed out. I sent a copy of that letter to the Attorney General's office with a promise that every single person involved in a motor vehicle accident in those intersections was going to be given a copy of that letter. And all of a sudden lights went in. I would suggest to you that right now, moving forward, the state of New Hampshire owns every accident that occurs in that intersection. In this day and age, and I can tell you right now that I would volunteer to be the first person to testify. Again, not directing this at you folks because I know you weren't here. I have personally been involved in that intersection for more than 35 years. There is such a documented paper trail of the request from the town of Ossipee to the state of New Hampshire that have been unanswered. I don't pity you sitting on the other end of a lawsuit, and I think they're coming. I think every single person that is involved in an accident in that, until we get this fixed, I think they have one hell of a case. A hell of a case. Ma'am, up back.
I was just off of this intersection. Would you please turn the camera? I do not want my face shown. Thank you. I've lived there for 50 years. I live close enough so I can hear every time there's a collision there. I can hear every time police, local or state, fire department or departments have to respond. I will stay out of their way. I'm a retired nurse. I don't want to be involved in getting in anybody's way. And I'd like to thank all of them, for one thing. For another thing, my memory goes back so far that I can remember when 28 wasn't where it was. It came up through the village and back out.
That's what I was talking about, yeah.
I'm an old farm, I'll admit it. But I do think we need the four-way stops. I think that's our only option. And I have noticed, I travel 171 twice a week because I take somebody to and from a doctor and other places because she can't drive. When I come out of 171 headed toward the village, I cannot see up over that knoll.
That's right.
It's a blind knoll. The other thing I have observed coming off of 171 headed towards Tuftonboro or the courthouse, whatever, people don't pay attention to signs. They drive like bats out of hell.
Right, yes.
They do on my own road, which is Browns Ridge Road, which many years ago, before my time, used to be Route 16.
That's right.
I even have sheriff's department cars going like the no lights, bats out of hell. Local police cars going bats out of hell. I'm assuming, possibly wrongly, that they're on their way someplace, but if they're going to drive like that, they need a light on. Thanks.
Thank you. Rick?
I just have a follow-up question regarding the traffic light. You said it would take a while to get it installed properly, which I appreciate. How long is that?
We would go through, for a long-term solution, it would be a similar time frame from a design standpoint. So we still have to go through the same process. If there's property acquisitions that are necessary, that takes time. That requires a public hearing. All of this takes time. The design has to be completed and the construction has to be completed. So it's going to take time.
But I think there's two parts to this question. To do them permanent, I agree. I understand. What we're here to talk about today is what do we do right now? What do we do tomorrow, this coming week, this coming month? Is there a possibility, and why is it, if it's not, a possibility to put in lights, to do the four-way stop, do advanced warning lights, and then spend all the time you want doing your engineering and redesigning of that intersection to accomplish what folks want? The problem, sir, with respect, we can't wait for the state to do more engineering, more studies, more. I understand that's the process, but what can we do this month? What can we have accomplished by the end of October? Can we have temporary lights that are triggered and get this so it stops while we all take a breath and wait for whatever happens in 2020?
I guess I can't make a promise today to tell you that within a month that there are temporary signals that can go up there. What I can promise is that we're going to look hard and do what we can to work towards. Rumble strips seem to be a good solution to get people's attention. We can look to procure some flashing lights for the stop signs to make them more visible on the approaching approaching minor approaches, and look into what we can do if we put in a four-way stop with stop signs. Those things are something that we can look at. But certainly the rumble strips are reasonable and something that we could look to get in the next month, and the lights on the stop signs to make them more visible. That and we can look towards to see if there's an availability and can we move towards a temporary setup for traffic signals. I can't promise that.
Representative Ed Comeau, Brookfield, Wakefield, Ossipee, and Effingham. Step one, within the hour, they should have police at that intersection stopping traffic. There needs to be a construction zone created, traffic calming measures as you enter the area. So police first, start constructing it as a construction zone. It's going to be a construction zone. Get the people used to the fact that they're going to have to stop. And then at the intersection where the construction will lead to, a four-way stop right there. There always has to be a police presence. I would say right now that the police in this town would give up their own time to stand in that intersection until this intersection is actually physically fixed. But the construction zone, the traffic calming measures that they have in the state could certainly stop that traffic in both directions. And then we can argue later about a roundabout or any other measure. But it has to be done within an hour, because there could be an accident in an hour. Thank you.
Some of the things, this is a great meeting, Rick, I thank you for it. And some of the things that have been said are really quite revealing. I want to thank Senator Bradley for pushing forward with at least getting a roundabout discussion. But one of the things that I noted was, that was 2 years ago, and the gentleman back here who is one of the three corners, owns one of the three corners, hasn't got a letter yet. Hasn't got a letter requesting eminent domain. It's been 2 years. I would think that'd be the first thing you do in the week. I, myself, personally, don't trust you. I trust that you know what you're doing when it's just regular business. But this isn't regular business. There is no way that you shouldn't be able to say to us today that within a month that you'll have some remedial action taking place. It can't be that hard to put in four-way stop signs. It can't be. And that would work. And doing the other things would work. I get the feeling that you don't want to, because there's other things you want to do first that fits into your way of doing business. Well, your way of doing business has failed this community. And it's going to fail it unless you can make a commitment today. And if you can't make a commitment today, I'm going to ask Mr. Parker if he'll get back to Governor Sununu and see if he'll make a commitment today. And if that commitment today requires replacing people who won't make a commitment when they can, then so be it.
Last time, go ahead.
Hey, Jeff, I've noticed when I go down in southern New Hampshire, state's doing a lot of work. We've been promised a lot of work up here, the 141 up by Johnson's Gas, the bridges, several places. A lot of things been done up here. We don't seem to be very important as part of the county. But southern New Hampshire seems to be very important. You guys don't do your job.
All right, one more, and I'm going to try to bring this all together. So and I want you folks to participate in the vote here, sure.
I hope due note has been taken of what the taxpayers sitting here feel about a roundabout. I agree with that woman. They are ridiculous. Traffic, they seem to see who can beat who around it. Who can beat who into the traffic. That's all it comes down to. And I know when there was speaking about a roundabout up where 41, up 41, 16, there was a man that spoke that night and said he is a driver of waste, of chips. Trucks with really stuff that is caustic. And he could not make it around these roundabouts with us trucks without dumping it over, and then you've got a disaster. I hate roundabouts, and I hope that the taxpayers here have been listened to.
One more, now you are back.
From what I've been hearing, and from knowing that I have 3 family members working for the state of New Hampshire, DOT has stalling tactics, which go along with the New Hampshire government. Just this morning on the news, on Channel 9, they're already talking and making plans for widening 93 south.
That'll be done tomorrow.
It's to help with us up here. Thank you.
Yes, I had a truck in an accident in this section. I've almost had 4 or 5 there myself. People just drive across. They don't pay any attention to stop signs, whether be it red light, green light. If they're going, they're going. If you don't put some rumble strips there and some high areas to really get them to attention, there's a stop sign there, it will solve a lot of the problems. But also, a roundabout, if you can't put the plow and the wing down on every single snow removal piece of equipment and drive around it, don't build it.
All right.
It's too small. You've got a camper on a pickup truck, and I was over the other side of the state, and I had all I could do to get around it. There's no need of them building them something small. Especially with these big trailer trucks and stuff. I drive trucks all the time. These trailers hauling heavy equipment with Jeeps and everything else on them, and if you don't know what it is, investigate about it. They can't go around them safely. And you can't drive for everybody. If people thank you, well, I'm going.
All right, I want to try to bring this together, okay? First of all, thank you all for coming. I think there have been some good ideas. What I'd like now, by a show of hands, how many people support the installation of rumble strips immediately?
Just on 178.
By a show of hands, how many people support the installation of 4-way stoplights in that intersection immediately? Both.
Yeah, I got a husband who's not here. I want to vote for him.
Want them all.
What I'm going to do today, and I'm just simply going to pledge to you, this has been an item on our selectmen's agenda literally every single week. It's a standing part of our agenda for over 2 years. It's going to stay there. And we're going to continuously push and ask for updates. You all need to understand, and I'm sure these folks do, that this is not a town road. It's a state highway. It is, what we're trying to do is use what little bully pulpit we have to push those people who do control that intersection. And quite frankly, that's these gentlemen, that's the governor, That's the DOT. I'm going to ask that they keep on top of this, that we make this happen, something happen in that intersection immediately. Jeff?
So, thank you, Rick. Let me ask Mike a couple of questions. Obviously, going back to the meeting that we had in my office a couple of years ago, out of which the idea for the roundabout came. My question is, having heard from the select board about their clear preference, members of the public, are you willing to reconsider the decision to put in a roundabout?
Yes.
Would it help you, because I know that you're driven by federal guidelines in terms of the amount of traffic counts before you use federal funds, which obviously we use for road construction of this type. Would it help you if some of us filed legislation to direct a four-way stop traffic light at that intersection so that you don't have to worry about those standards that you need to comply with?
I think the standards will apply, whatever we choose to do, but we also say the funding shouldn't be a problem because we have dedicated safety funding that can support work like this. The legislation probably isn't necessary. It wouldn't hurt, but it isn't necessary.
All right, so I guess what I would ask, and I don't know if I speak for all the elected officials here, but there seems to be broad consensus on some things that can be done right away without any question. Better signage, rumble strips, and elimination of the passing lane coming north on 28. Is that correct? Okay, so I guess what I'd suggest is that you get back to the Board of Selectmen, myself, Councilor Kenny, the governor's office, the state reps here, within, you know, a couple of weeks at the absolute outside as to whether you would be willing to reconsider the installation of the roundabout, because obviously once a process is in place, you're kind of locked into it, and then construction starts and eminent domain happens and all of the permitting, so that in the same kind of hopeful time frame of 2019, if the decision is reconsidered, as I think it would be appropriate for that to happen, that all of the effort gets directed, instead of building a roundabout, to doing a four-way stop with the appropriate lights. Yes. Do you think you can have that kind of, you know, consensus coming out of yourself, Mike, and Commissioner Cass and Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes.
Within a couple of week period of time? Is that suitable?
It is on the overline, on the issue of whether or not they'll reconsider the roundabout. I think that's fine, but I got to be very blunt with you. I mean, we started this Monday afternoon. We put out a letter, and we're all here.
Well, I think it's safe to say that signage, rumble strips, passing lane elimination are going to start happening as soon as.
Well, what I would like to see is that to make sure that it happens, that all of you
that's why we're
not be notified, not next week, not 2 weeks. I don't see any reason whatsoever why we shouldn't know this coming week an absolute time schedule on when those things are going to go in. When are the when are the rumble strips going in? When are we doing X, Y, and Z? If we can get all of you here in 3 days, we should be able to get this done in a week.
And I think that the point I was trying to make, because I agree with you, is that the consensus coming out of here on the immediate and emergency measures starts today, and I think Mike has agreed to that, right?
Can you close that section?
So in terms of rumble strips, better signage, elimination of the passing lane, that starts right away. And I think Mike has just confirmed that. And what I was asking for is a decision on reconsideration of the roundabout within 2 weeks.
Perfect. Yeah.
Can we clarify that this includes rumble strips on Route 28? Because I think there's clear consensus here that everybody wants to slow down Route 28.
Correct.
And I did not hear that coming from you guys, that you wanted rumble strips on 28. We were initially just talking about rumble strips on 174.
And strobe lights, because not all of us have perfect hearing. And the strobe light worked yesterday for 2 people that were in the coming from Freedom through Effingham Falls. They have restored the rumble strips, but they also have the strobe light. It was the strobe light that helped me because I didn't pay attention to the noise of the car. The vibration caused one lady to get out of her car and check her tires.
That's true.
I heard that at the lunch last night, supper last night.
Mark, I think Representative Comeau offered an immediate solution. A little bit outside the box, but that's what we need, is outside the box thinking. What would prevent DOT from designating that as a construction zone today and putting up construction type lighting and pay for a police officer when necessary, and to treat that like the construction zone? That at least would relieve some of the immediate danger, I would think. So could that be done?
You know, I'm not gonna commit to doing that today.
Oh, Chris, no.
I'm not gonna commit to doing that today. It's another potential solution.
What about closing the exit up to the old courthouse? Just close that exit. As the lady was saying, the old road used to go right up through
the old Carroll County Courthouse. But to close that to through traffic from there out to 28 and 171. If you redirected that 171 traffic so it comes down farther out down on 28, that doesn't seem to be a warmly supported proposal. All right, so all I can say to you at this point is we've had the meeting. I think there's been some good ideas. I believe the state has heard what it is that we're saying. And now it's up to your elected.
I do have one thing.
Go ahead.
Just as our DOT officials that are here, obviously our top echelon officials, Commissioner Sheehan, and the top level DOT officials are not here. Mr. Comeau is going to record that, has been recording. He's going to put it online, I assume.
Oh, absolutely.
And so my concern is that I know you're going to report back to them about the takeaways from today's meeting, which really require immediate action on different fronts. But I think it would be very important for the commissioner and the deputy commissioner late in the evening or this afternoon to listen to what the public had to say today about their passion about this issue, their personal experiences with 171 and 28, and to let them know that sometimes when we leave and all the noise stops and we go back into those offices, there's something that's lost. People are very passionate about this issue. We need to translate that passion to our commissioners, both Sheehan and Cass and Company, so that we do get immediate action. And lastly, I would just add that we probably as elected officials need to huddle and figure out when we need to come back to the town of Ossipee and explain to you what have we done and what do we need to further do.
Well, Joe, I was just going to say, and that was going to be the last of my remarks, is we are going to depend on you representatives who are in Comeau to make sure that all of what has been suggested here is done. You are the folks that hold the purse strings. You are the folks that have the oversight, much more than we do. We ask and we will continue to ask our Public Works Director to update us on a regular basis as to what's going on, as we do on other issues involving the state. But our ability to control that is pretty limited. So we are going to depend on you folks to keep us in the loop so that we can continuously report it back to the townspeople. And I think that if it is received with a degree of seriousness that I believe it was today, then I expect to see things happen, and they should happen quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We pledge to keep it on track. Again, Chris and I am very